Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. At the Salk, we're committed to being the place where cures begin. Our goal has been and will be to enrich human life. And one of the areas where we've had perhaps some of our most successful experiences is in cancer research. Several preeminent drugs in the field of cancer, including Gleevec, can all trace their roots back to the laboratories and investigators here at the Salk Institute. Yet we recognize that while significant progress has been made, humanity still has more to do before this cancer becomes a disease of the past. Not so long ago, people thought that polio would always be a threat to human life, and that devices like the iron lung would be a preeminent fixture in hospitals throughout the world. Jonas Salk, whose name this institute now bears, refused to accept that and persevered until he brought an end to polio's reign of terror. We're here tonight because we carry on Jonas Salk's spirit and determination. We believe that cancer is not only treatable, but it's beatable. I'm glad you've chosen to join us to launch Conquering Cancer. It's a Salk initiative focused on bringing an end to one of the world's most devastating diseases. Over the next couple hours, we'll hear from some men and women at the forefront of cancer discoveries. These are people that have dedicated their lives to see the end of this disease. We're also incredibly honored to have with us this evening Mr. Joe Biden, the 47th President of the United States of America, and one of cancer... Just checking to see if you're listening. I won't make that one again, Reuben. Joe Biden, the 47th Vice President of the United States and one of cancer research's most dedicated advocates. I also want to welcome Walter Eckert and Tony Hunter, who are two former directors of the Salk Cancer Center. Thank you for coming. Finally, I'd be remiss at not acknowledging a few special guests tonight who've made this tonight possible. First of all, Marna and Tom Whittington, thank you very much. Bob Abrams and Pfizer for their continued support. Liz Keetle and the 45th Vice President of the United States. Al Gore. And dear friend to the Salk Institute. When we first started planning this event, we were all incredibly excited at the prospect of having Joe Biden here. Tonight, as I look out at the full crowd, who believe, as we do here at the Salk, that cancer can be beaten, I'm so glad to be able to share this event with you. The science of cancer medicine is moving at an unprecedented speed. Each day, new leads for more precise, effective cancer therapies are being discovered. At Salk, perhaps like nowhere else, we're able to make discoveries and translate them from concepts to breakthroughs with speed that cancer demands and the people that are battling cancer deserve. The video we will play next will show you just how these breakthroughs are having an effect at the Salk. The progress is important because virtually everybody in this room, if not in the world, is impacted in some way by cancer. Our current Board of Trustees chair is just one example. Following the video, he'll share his story, but I want to introduce him to you first. Daniel C. Lewis is an individual with incredible talent, wisdom, and generosity. His talent earned him leadership roles in multinational corporations. His wisdom helped shape international aviation, travel, and tourism policy. And out of those experiences, he's been an incredibly generous partner with the Salk through his philanthropic support, but almost more importantly, his leading and his guidance. Yet in life replete with successes, cancer brings on challenges. Dan will share his story and the role that Salk science played in it in just a minute. Thank you for joining us. Video.
We genuinely come up with ideas that other places do not come up with. This has been the case, this has been the history of the Salk Institute, and this continues to be the case. And we are all pushing the boundaries of our research to go someplace that no one has gone before. Cancer affects 40% of the population. This means the odds of anyone having a close relative or a loved one develop cancer in their lifetime is nearly universal. This is something we simply can't escape. Even when we do have the top scientific treatments and the best tailored, personalized therapeutics, if a cancer is quite advanced, it has this insidious way of altering and mutating itself like a virus around whatever you treat it with, and develops resistance and comes back and lives to fight you another day. The goal of the Conquering Cancer Initiative is for Salk researchers to really focus on the 5 deadliest cancers. And these are pancreatic, glioblastoma, deadly brain cancer, triple-negative breast cancer, lung cancer, and ovarian cancer. In searching for therapeutics that will work best on these cancers, we will have a cascading effect and end up developing treatments for other forms of cancer.
We have a history of fundamental cancer research at the Institute, beginning with the work of Renato Becco on tumor viruses, for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1975. The Salk has a track record of developing its science into new drugs for cancer therapy. For instance, my discovery of the tyrosine kinases led to the development of Gleevec as a tyrosine kinase inhibitor that's used to treat a particular type of leukemia.
In 2006, I was diagnosed with a form of CML, which is chronic myelogenous leukemia. I had discovered later that one of the top researchers here at Salk, Tony Hunter, had done the foundational work to actually unlock a big part of what made Gleevec so successful.
Our goal is to tackle these 5 deadly cancers, for each of which little progress has been made in the last many years. And I think by working on these different cancers, we will learn basic principles that can be used for treatment of all types of cancer. And I'm sure we'll discover new biology along the way, which is really going to be, I think, from my perspective, the most exciting thing.
At Salk, we really encourage and enable our scientists to cut across disciplines and to come up with really out-of-the-box, unexpected ways to go after and chase down various diseases.
Cancer has been so challenging to combat for decades, in part because it's smarter than us. And we need to understand the basic principles of how cancer evades our ability to fight it. So evasion, in one word, is what I think cancer is spectacular at doing, and its ability to evade the normal rules of tissue function, its ability to evade virtually every drug we've thrown at cancer, and its ability to evade the immune system, which is something that I study and have a lot of interest in trying to understand how we can better engineer our immune system to fight cancer. One of the biggest challenges that we face in the field of cancer immunology is understanding why our immune system can't recognize and destroy the cancer cells.
As one strategy of the Cancer Initiative, we're taking a computational approach, which hasn't received as much attention over the years, but it takes advantage of these decades of data that are difficult to synthesize, but if we actually study them thoroughly the way we believe they behave, we can come up with new observations, new findings that would not have been obvious otherwise. So it adds a whole new approach to study the cancer problem. We think this approach can be a unique perspective to personalized medicine. We can come up with new ideas for how different patients should be targeted based off their mutations that goes beyond traditional approaches.
We believe that we have never been poised in the way we are now to truly come up with unique combinations of therapies. The goal here is nothing short of attacking each individual's cancers with a cocktail of tailored therapeutics attacking epigenetics, attacking metabolism, reprogramming the outside of the cell, going after the DNA itself to combinatorially eliminate, destroy the tumors before there is enough time for individual clones of the cancer to grow out and to come back later as a relapse. That is the goal, and so we believe that this is the time for conquering cancer and for conquering cancer at the Salk Institute.
Good evening. Wow, that is a very powerful video. And as Rusty said, everyone has some kind of cancer along the way. I'm no exception, because my cancer is a story about my personal story. You know, when I reflect back on, in 2006, I did a normal routine physical. And on that routine physical, they told me that we think we have messed up your blood sample with someone else, and we'd like to have you come in and take another sample. Well, I was somewhere in Washington at the time, and I remember saying, well, I'll do that on Monday. And so I waited till Monday. My oncologist was very upset about that and put me on something right away to get started with the issue. But this is a disease that at that time, Gleevec was coming through, had been approved, but at that time I asked him what the survival rate of this particular disease is. And he says it's a 3-year death sentence. And without the work done here at Salk by Tony Hunter, which put together the pieces that really made the drug work and efficient, it could have been a different outcome. So if you ever needed evidence that it's taking place at Salk, it is. Just look at me. So I would like to introduce our next speaker and to continue on with the evening. Reuben Shaw, which you saw speaking in the video, currently serves as the director of the Cancer Center at Salk. Reuben's work lives in one of the most, to me, interesting intersections of healthcare. Ever since discovering just about a decade ago a gene that altered lung cancer, that regulated the enzymes used in diabetes medicine, Reuben explored whether drugs were originally designed to treat metabolic diseases could also work against cancer. By discovering a connection between cancer and metabolism, Reuben opened up the host of new possibilities for therapeutics that would treat both cancer and the one type of diabetes and work quickly to move to the forefront of the cancer research. With that, please join me and welcome Reuben Shaw.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight for this very special occasion. I'd like to take the next few minutes before we have our cancer panel to tell you a little bit more about our Conquering Cancer initiative and what some of our goals and our approaches are. We believe this is the time for this initiative and that Salk is the place where we can really make this difference. And we have clickers. Okay. So one of the themes that you saw on the previous slide that really
runs through the work here is discovery beyond boundaries. And what do we mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that at Salk, there is great strength and great historical pride in individual researchers cutting across disciplines. So even though we're trying to seek answers on how to cure cancer, we will reach across, as my own work did, as Dan just said, into other areas of diabetes research or neurobiology, and that we really have an open mind and know that novel ideas and novel breakthroughs often come from people looking at something from a different vantage point. So that's one of the key things of discovery beyond boundaries. Another key thing is that the Salk, as I'll tell you in a second, is very small, and it, by definition, involves collaborations between investigators here and investigators at different institutions around the world. The Salk is really a nucleator of innovation, and in that respect, we consistently reach beyond boundaries. So the goals now of our Conquering Cancer initiative are, as you heard in the video with much more dramatic music behind me, to focus on 5 deadly cancers. And just to recap that, those cancers are glioblastoma, pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, triple-negative breast cancer, and ovarian cancer. We've chosen these 5 because these are amongst the most deadly, and they're also the most refractory to current treatments. As I said in the video, we also believe firmly that by studying these 5 and coming up with novel combinations of new therapeutics against them, this will have a trickle-down cascading effect, and we will, inadvertently even, pick off treatments that work on many other forms of cancer. So I don't want you to leave here thinking that we're only focused on those 5 and that's all we care about. If you go on the Salk website, you'll easily see that many of us work on other forms as well. Another main feature, another main goal of ours is really to push cancer research now into what we call from the bench to bedside and then back to the bench. Now, what do I mean by that? Many of you may have heard of the expression bench to bedside. That means from when we make a discovery, a fundamental discovery of how cancer cells are different or some feature of one subset of cancer, that we take those discoveries and try to build them up to the point that we can actually have a specific therapeutic based on our discovery that enters into the clinic. And it'll just start off at an early stage clinical trial. That's great. That has been a goal of all researchers for the past 20 years. We basically have enough information now that we know that that is not good enough. We can just safely assume that even in those early stage clinical trials, that there's critical information that comes out that only a subset of patients are likely to respond even to the most thoughtful and rational scientific approach. So what we need to do now is to actually take the data right out of those even early stage clinical trials, come back to the bench and figure out what are biomarkers, what are the specific things that are in common amongst the exceptional responders to a new therapeutic, and what is in common amongst the people who don't respond at all, as if they've been given placebo. So that is a major feature of our approach and of our goals for the future. We also want to, as you heard, we want to shorten the time that it takes, even from an initial discovery, to get into the clinic in the first place. This used to take, until very recently, on average, about 15 years. We want to chop that down to more like 3 to 5 years, we think is possible, and so that is a very active goal that we have to try to meet. And then finally, here at Salk, again, one of our key focuses is on that interface of research disciplines. We know that by having a card-carrying cancer biologist sitting right next to a neurobiologist, sitting next to someone who works on the immune system, that new ideas will percolate and come out that just don't come out in other places where there's a whole building dedicated for immunology. And then there's a separate building dedicated for solid tumors and that type of thing. Salk is really very unique in that way. So what are the key things that make Salk different? Contrasting with what I just told you about other major cancer centers where there's 8 10-story glass buildings dedicated to different subtypes of cancer, Salk is small. But it is also small by design. Over the years, over the past couple of decades, there have been many calls and offers from corporations and individuals to build other buildings around us, to build campuses in other places, and the faculty have always thoughtfully considered those and always ultimately decided to not pursue that, because we actually believe that one of the secrets of the many breakthroughs that consistently come up here is because it is still confined to the original four walls, the original Louis Kahn-inspired building, which also, for those of you who haven't toured at endless times, is all open laboratory space. And that was what Jonas Salk originally wanted when he worked with Louis Kahn. He wanted people to intermix. You may also have noticed there's no room numbers even. This is very challenging for people when they first start working here. Baffling and frustrating, I'll say. But that also, Jonas wanted that. He actually wanted people to physically bump into each other and ideas to bump into each other. And I think the proof is already in that that worked and continues to work. And so we want to keep it that way. Another thing that goes back to Jonas's original vision for the place is bold thinking. Really to think of what are the biggest, most vexing, challenging problems in a particular disease. So rather than making a series of safe, incremental advances, I'm going to study this small subtype of lung cancer and then maybe in a couple years branch out to the other one, to step back. And we really encouraged our young faculty when they start here to think of that. What are the broadest unanswered questions? How does metabolism work with the immune system within the immune cells and the entire surrounding environment to reprogram cancer? Big, broad questions. So not, a series of quick first downs, but actually, Hail Marys. Go back, kid, all the way back. That also brings vexing challenges, but we believe that that's how real breakthroughs happen. And finally, another feature that helps make the other two possible is because the place is so collaborative. It's really in the DNA of the place and in the individuals that first came and then carried on the history that Jonas and the original founding fellows created. This picture is a picture of all of the current professors and senior staff in Salk's Cancer Center, as well as a handful of people on our external advisory board in the front row. And this shows you exactly what I mean when I say that it's small and exactly what the size and the faces of the people who are working hard every single day right now to fight cancer at the Salk. But we don't, as I said, just do that alone. In fact, we engage with other partners both locally as well as internationally, nationally and internationally. So some of you may not know this. In the United States, there are actually only 2 cities in the whole US that have 3 NCI-designated cancer centers. One of them is New York City. And I don't just mean Manhattan, like all of New York City. The other is San Diego. You're sitting in one of them right now, and the other 2 are within 2 miles of where you're sitting right now. So the UCSD Moores Comprehensive Cancer Center is one of the others in San Diego, and Sanford Burnham has another so-called basic cancer center like Salk's, in slightly different than New York. Here in San Diego, all of the research, the cancer centers work together in concert. We're not competing with each other for patients, for anything else. And that has allowed us to really leverage things in a greater way than would have been possible. As just one example of that, we actually have joint fundraisers, including the Padres Pedal the Cause, that probably even some of you in the audience take part in. And this has been a major boost to even the research here at Salk, because we have now started working routinely with clinicians at Moores, writing grants together, working on individual patients in real time. So there are examples of patients at Moores right now and at Rady's Children's Hospital right now, and samples are coming back across the street, and researchers here at Salk are working on them in people who are still alive. We're coming up with things based on what is going on in real time. And that simply was not the case, and probably was not even possible even 5 years ago. So this is truly a unique time in the world of cancer research, but it's also a very unique time here at Salk. I just want to mention one other thing that's on the slide here. Some of you will have heard of Stand Up to Cancer. That's the Hollywood-based, George Clooney, Jennifer Aniston telethon that happens once a year, that it is very prominent in funding different types of cancer research. They deliberately fund teams that cut across different cities, even cut across cities internationally. We're very proud here at Salk that of the current 10, there's only 10 total active dream teams funded by Stand Up to Cancer, and we have one of them. that's headed by Dr. Ron Evans, who you'll hear as part of our panel, working with Dr. Tony Hunter and Jeff Wall, with a team in London, in fact, for fighting pancreatic cancer. And I'll just leave it at that, but that's another amazing thing that we have going on. So I just want to give you, in the last 2 slides here, a little flavor of what I mean by discovery beyond boundaries. So for those of you who don't know a little bit more about that fundamental discovery, in the late 1970s, about 500 yards from where we're sitting right now, Tony Hunter made a discovery about a protein modification. He discovered a new, unexpected protein modification. Many people may have noticed what he saw and literally thought, that's weird, I don't know what that means, I'm going to ignore that and get back to what the point of the experiment was, because that was not the point of the experiment. But Tony, not being not thinking in that way, thought this makes no sense, this is heretical, and I'm going to chase this. And chase it he did. And he nailed down this new discovery, but he didn't stop there. So if that first observation was true, then, and it was enriched in cancer cells, then the prediction would be whatever's causing it might also be enriched in cancer cells, and maybe it would be a drug target. So first they had to find the enzymes that were causing the modification, and he and others did that. And then after that, it took another 20 years to go from the original observation until there were actually small molecules that could work in people, survive in the blood, hit the target in the tumor, and actually then get FDA approval. And Gleevec is one of the first examples of that. It was first approved on a limited basis in 2001. Tony made the discovery of tyrosine phosphorylation in 1979. So that tells you a little bit about what the course of how things have happened in the past. Now, since 2001, there are 32 tyrosine kinase inhibitors that are widely used in all different forms of cancer, and there's probably another 30 more than that behind them already actively in trials. This is the kind of transformative discovery beyond boundaries that the Salk is famous for, and we want to do more and more of in the future. And it's hardly the only one. Another example that I'll just touch on, because you'll hear more about it from Dr. Evans himself on the panel. But in the past 5 years, Ron Evans' lab, who's a leader in exercise and in metabolism and metabolic disease, Ron's lab has worked on cancer in the past, as he'll tell you, but he now started getting interested in pancreatic cancer. And of all things, it stemmed out of an interest in fibrosis in the liver. Not actually in cancer, but actually in studying a particular vitamin that actually regulates whether or not your liver undergoes fibrosis. What he also knew was that one thing that was becoming apparent more and more when people were studying pancreatic cancer is it wasn't just that there weren't good drugs, which there's not, but on top of that, the drugs they did have weren't even getting inside the tumor. So you couldn't even begin to make a good drug because you couldn't get anything to get inside the tumor in the first place. And Ron wondered, well, is there a way that we can actually use the information we gained from fibrosis and study the pancreas and unlock the secrets of pancreatic cancer? And I'll stop there and let Ron tell you the rest of the story. Finally, to come back to Dan's intro of me, my own discovery about 10 years ago now of this direct connection between a commonly mutated gene in lung cancer and a central metabolic enzyme involved in fighting type 2 diabetes was also completely heretical. And the people who worked on cancer absolutely hated this idea. And the only people who hated it more than the cancer people were the people who worked on type 2 diabetes, who completely despised the idea that there might be something so direct and causal. From that point, though, we thought if that's true, that this anti-diabetic drug metformin, which is the most widely used type 2 diabetes drug in the world, if that actually has anti-cancer properties, then another prediction that comes out of that is that not only will all the people who've been taking metformin actually have a lower risk of cancer, which turns out to be borne out, but beyond that, that the whole pathway around it, all these other metabolic enzymes, might be deregulated in different subsets of cancer. And so that has been a passion of mine and my team, working with Ron Evans, also now working with Sue Keck in the immune system, and they've done brilliant orthogonal approaches, which has now opened up whole new areas. And it's that same type of just unexpected doors then open to other doors, and it turns out you're in the middle of a labyrinth and you didn't even know there was a door in the first place. Okay, so let me just wrap up then and say the take-homes you should walk away with are: the Salk is small, nimble, and innovative. And we believe and we know that for the first time, things that were previously deemed untreatable are in fact treatable. And the message I want to send to all of you is really to join us as we set out to conquer cancer.